Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another video cast. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the movie that we recently watched, Sweet Crude by Sandy Kofi. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. It's entitled Sweet Crude. It is based in the Niger Delta. It is a documentary which highlights the injustice and the struggle occurring within the Niger Delta. I'll start with saying that this was a fantastic documentary, one which I would highly recommend for anyone to watch. It, touched on many different levels, including the damage being done to Nigeria by the oil companies, the cycle of debt that is occurring, and how petrodollars aren't being trickled down into the hands of individuals within Nigeria, and also looked at the struggle of men, which is the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, and how they have been labeled terrorists by the United States, but this is really a political move, which we will talk about in a little bit. So begin with the basic, like I said, the basic premise of this movie. It's based in Nigeria, and it's looking at oil and how the oil companies and the extraction of oil has shaped Nigeria and Nigeria's economy. It's really scary. Oil is Nigeria's chief export. It's the U.S.'s, I believe, number 4, number 5 exporter of oil. So we import almost, I want to say 20%, but I could be wrong in that, of our foreign oil comes from Nigeria. So obviously a lot of wealth is flowing into that country. However, the problem is the wealth is not being trickled down into the individuals. People within the Niger Delta are extremely poor. Nigeria ranks very low on the Human Rights Index, by the UN, and most people are in the Niger Delta are living a subsistent living, where they're fishing for food, and that's about all they can get, and their livelihoods are being destroyed because of the pollution being implemented by the oil companies. Massive amounts of pollution are occurring, which has resulted in the average age of a Niger Delta citizen being reduced from 60 to around 40. Acid rain is a constant threat from the burn-off, which destroys the huts, the tin roofs. It's really quite sad to watch. And yet all this wealth is within the area. You have companies like Dutch Shell and Exxon pumping billions and billions of dollars out of the Niger Delta, and none of this money is being passed out. The Nigerian government, however, gets billions and billions of dollars from these oil companies, but that money stays within the top 1%, which a lot of it is skimmed off the top because of corruption. So this highlights, this concept of a resource curse. The resource curse being that Nigeria and many developing states, tend to rely upon one chief resource for their economy, and as a result, they don't diversify their economy, and they're stuck in this cycle of debt and dependence for these foreign companies, which creates problems because they can't move out or pay off the debts, and they can't move forward. So it's an extremely complicated situation. So going back to the Niger Delta, you have all this money, within the government and within the oil companies, yet none of it is reaching the states within the Niger Delta. the president of Nigeria pretty much ignores the area. The government doesn't exist. So as a result, this movement formed for MEND. The goal is they want to redistribute the wealth. They want to have an equal say in the amount of oil that can be extracted. They want to get some of the money that for the resources that is rightfully theirs. That is their basic argument. However, any protests or any resistance by MEND is met with brutal force by the Nigerian army. Any resistance is seen as resistance against the state, and as a result, it is crushed. So the militants, the MEND, guerrillas, started this militant group to fight against the government. As a result, they have attacked several pipelines, bombed pipelines, shut off oil. They have taken hostages, attacked ships, all in an effort to A, shut down oil production within the region, and B, to gain international awareness. And it's a true struggle against the state. It's not a terrorist group per se. However, the United States government has labeled them as terrorists because of the threat they pose to U.S. national interests. Obviously, U.S. national interests being the cheap, readily supplied access to oil. When a group of terrorists attack an oil pipeline, it slows production, which sends a shock in oil prices around the world, which affects the U.S. economy. One of the most interesting factors in the documentary was facts within the documentary was President Bush, in a private meeting with the Nigerian president, offered U.S. Marines to go clean up the area. So it shows that U.S. interests aren't about what is right or what is just. It's what is cheap, what is effective, and what will continue to supply oil to the U.S. So anyway, MEND has engaged in these actions to fight for liberty and justice, and the Nigerian government, it constantly flows back and forth. The so-called leader of the organization, Jomo Bomo, I believe is how you say his name. We'll go with Jomo. Is a mysterious figure that no one has ever met. So there's some speculation as to his legitimacy within the organization and whether he is fictitious or perhaps someone ran by either the Nigerian government or the CIA. So no one really knows. Even within the group, no one has any idea who he is. However, in the documentary, Miss Sandy got to interview several people within the organization. One interesting fact about MEND is that it is an open organization, so anybody can claim they are from MEND, and there's no sort of accountability. So this leads to a lot of different problems where people will be doing stuff under the auspices of MEND that may be for private gain or not acting under the group's beliefs or supervision. However, the groups are relatively well run, and they follow the directions of the local leaders. So it's not to say that they are disorganized or a bunch of bandits. It's that anybody can just take up the title. So one interesting tactic that I thought was not so unique but fascinating was the use of hostages and capturing people who worked on these oil crews, excuse me. I thought this related a lot to Somalia, at least in the early days of the Somali conflict, where pirates would be trying to fight Western trawlers from dumping and stealing their fish. So they were protecting their national interests and trying to get some money. And I think that there's some strong parallels between men and these tactics of taking hostages for money for ransom to gain awareness and the pirates in Somalia. So I think that would be something very interesting to explore. Um, we read this article by Vanity Fair. The author's name was Junger, I believe, who point out that these militants are extremely well armed, more so than the Nigerian government, which it shows that this area can be a potential powder keg for conflict. The Nigerian government is not above using air attacks or helicopters to go in and bomb a village. Yet, um, there may not be any manned operatives there. It's one attack is committed and then men will respond in kind. And the Nigerian government wants to kill the leaders of men despite actions by the men operatives to abide by agreements. There was a segment in the documentary where one of the leaders was gunned down along with a hostage that he was going to release. Excuse me, the leader actually wasn't there, but the leader had secured the release of the hostage, and the Nigerian government gunned down the entire group. So, I guess tying this back into the readings and the problems within the region is that, developmentally speaking, it is within the West's interest to keep Nigeria weak, to keep the oil flowing because it keeps the price down. It also means that the oil companies can take advantage of the region. They're not held responsible for any of the pollution within the area. Nothing, they can, extract as much oil as they want and only pay very little, thus record profits. So it is, a prime example of neocolonialism. Nigeria is reliant on oil as its only means of income. I mean, yes, you have the Nollywood industry that is forming, but really, oil is the main money maker. So it's quite fascinating to see what oil has done to the region and how such inequality can exist in an area of so much money. So I think that'll be all. Ultimately, very good movie, very good movie, very moving. It highlights not only the injustice going on within the region, but also some of the problems within the U.S. foreign policy, and it shows how one group can be a freedom fighter and maybe fighting a legitimate fight, but U.S. government will label them terrorists, and U.S. press will call them terrorists. I'll leave you with the one clip from ABC. It was two clips on the screen. One was the interview with a guy who was representing MEND, and the other was Brian Walters, I believe, was the reporter, who kept asking the guy, Paul, whether he was a terrorist, whether MEND was a terrorist action. He was looking for a sort of confession, to be able to label them terrorists. And ultimately, in the report that aired, there was no mention of the interview, and they kept calling MEND a terrorist group, which did not highlight their struggle accurately. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. So long. Good night.